Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with Kim Curtis, and Kim's going to share a story that probably many of us are familiar with, at least those of us who have gone to college and have taken out school loans. And so, Kim has an undergraduate and a law degree, and it's after the law degree that her story begins because she found herself in a situation and really didn't know how she got there. And I don't think she had a plan on getting out, but we're going to have that conversation today. We're going to have it right now. Kim, it's all on you. Who
Oh,
are
thank you.
you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Keith. I'm happy to be here.
So, who are you?
Who is Kim Curtis? I am currently the CEO of a wealth management firm in Denver, Colorado. I'm the founder of that firm that I created almost 17 years ago, and it's kind of a small boutique national giant, if that makes sense. So I love what I do, and that's why this
It's a
story is
small
so
giant.
remarkable.
You
Small giant.
you literally said it's a small giant.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I meant it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why this story is so remarkable considering where I came from.
Okay. So you have an undergraduate degree in criminal justice, I believe, right? Went into
hmm
law school and finished law school successfully. You are an attorney by practice?
No,
No.
I am not an attorney. I actually graduated with an area of expertise in negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. So it was more on the administrative side.
Okay. Well,
Judicial administration was my degree.
but you found yourself in some financial hoodwinks, I guess, and a situation. Talk to us about that.
Sure. It's interesting. I defaulted on my school loan debt within 6 months after graduating from college, from law school, and I had no business understanding the implications of a credit report. I was completely unconscious around money and what money meant at
Okay.
that time. And so the idea of defaulting on my school loans, it was like, for sure, take money from a stone. I mean, I have nothing to offer. And so that was my attitude at the time.
So let's talk about that. How do you, for those who don't know how that actually would occur, how do you default on your school loans? So what actually happens?
Well, it's not like immediate. You have a series of letters and phone calls of people letting you know that your school loans are going to be starting, that you owe money. And when you don't pay on that money, you then have creditors that follow you to tell you that you need to pay or come up with some kind of payment plan. And I pretty much ignored a lot of that. And then ultimately, when you ignore that, the creditor puts you in default. And what that means is that your credit report plummets. And that from that point forward becomes very difficult to establish any type of buying a home, purchasing a vehicle. All of those things become extremely difficult, if not impossible.
Okay. And it was simply a matter of you just not having a conversation with somebody, I'm assuming. Is that
Many conversations, ignoring. I mean, I had a few conversations at the time, but when you believe that you have no money or that money is for other people, not you, you already have a defeatist standpoint around it. So for me personally, I took no ownership
Hmm,
of the reality of what that meant,
okay. So no ownership of the fact that you had a school loan and had to pay it back, or
that I was capable of paying it back.
that you were capable
I
of paying
knew
it
I
back.
had a school loan,
Okay.
but the idea that I was capable of, in today's dollars, it was about $92,000
Okay.
um, in today's dollars. So it was so overwhelming to me that it seemed that I felt defeated right out of the gate.
Okay. So with that, I know in our previous conversation we talked about our personal stories that we tell ourselves around money. Um, and I've had other conversations with people who have used similar verbiage. You know, we have conversations in our head, or
Mhm.
we have conversations out loud with ourselves. You know, that's not out of the question about our own reality, and whether it's money
Mhm.
or whatever, our this conversation just happens to be about money. What were the conversations that you were having around money? Your own conversations.
Mhm.
What were they?
Well, it goes back to what's my money history. And my money history, my parents didn't talk about money. And by the time I became a teen, my parents divorced and my mother got full custody of three teenage girls.
Okay.
And as a result of that, and she had no employable skills. So she applied for and received government assisted lunches for us. And it was a red paper ticket at the time that looked like it actually was like a raffle ticket. That's was the ticket. And I had to hand that ticket to the cashier every single day. And so I would go to the
To get lunch.
farthest to get lunch.
Okay.
So I would go to the furthest line away from my friends, way far away. As I grabbed my plate and put it on my tray, I'd get it out of my pocket and put it under my plate and slide, you're walking down, sliding your tray down. And right before I got to the cashier, I'd kind of look to see if any of my friends were nearby and then quickly hand that to her. That shame around that ticket and the implications of what it meant that I was poor, that my family couldn't afford lunch, that I was unworthy, that money was for other people, certainly not me. So those were some of the stories that I was telling myself as a
Inside.
result.
Yeah. And even
As a
as young
result
as
of
a
that.
teenager, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So did your mama not have conversations with you about your the reality of growing up? How she had to, you know, earn a living, get a job, and raise three kids, or
She was remarkable to watch as a
okay.
result of that. She got married early, right before she finished high school, because my father got drafted into the war. Uh, and so they married early, 3 months before her graduation, and moved to a new state. So my mom, that with no employable skills, was a stay-at-home mom. And so to recognize having three teenage daughters, what was very important to her was education,
Oh, okay.
because no one can take it away from you, is what she would tell us.
Oh,
So
good.
make sure you get your education. No one can take that away from you. And I think ultimately what that meant was financial security. So I went to undergrad and then I kept going and went to law school. And so it was more the value of education than the understanding of the debt behind it.
Okay. But with that, you're now faced with a situation that eventually you had to come clean with. I mean,
Yes, I did.
I'm hoping at some point
Yeah.
that, if you've got creditors chasing you, you've got phone calls and letters, at some point something has to click to say, "Phew, maybe I am
Mhm.
responsible here." Did that
Yeah, I
ever
love that.
happen? Did
Of
that
course it
ever?
happened,
Okay.
considering what I do today. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
we're going to get to that in a little bit. So, what was that? Where did that pivot come from that said, I should change the story around money, my own
I
story?
love that. I love how you say that. So several years later, I had um, an anonymous person put $1,000 on my school loan debt.
Mm.
Now, what's interesting is when your head's in the sand on how you do money is how you do life, is what I say all the time. So when your head is in the sand on money, trust me, it's in the sand in other areas of your life as well. So for the viewers and listeners, recognize that how you do money is how you're showing up in other areas of your life. So recognize that that could be a trigger. So the fact that I even opened the statement was surprising to notice that the balance went down. And
Oh,
when I
wait,
did
so you got a statement and somebody had already paid on it.
$1,000. And at the
And it,
time, to me, 1,000 was like $1 million to me at the time when
oh
you
yeah.
think of like, wow, that's a lot of money. And yeah,
Well, that's interesting because I'm thinking just based on the story that you probably would have just put that letter aside and ignored it. But something happened
the
this one
statement.
time
Hmm.
that said, maybe I should open it. That's
I
interesting.
know.
Yeah.
I tend to trust whatever that is in terms of destiny or how things unfold.
Yeah.
But yes, I opened the statement and I happened to notice it. And because it was anonymous, I couldn't go to that person and say, you know, what do you see in me? What do you want? this is cool. You got more. I mean, whatever the messages are that you would want, I had to ask those questions to myself. So, what is it that someone saw in me that I don't see in me?
Mm,
Who am I? Who do I want to be? And I have to tell you, Dr. Keith, that it was like a snap, an instant when I opened that statement
mhm,
of as I was asking these questions, it was kind of simultaneous of wow, wow, someone really cares about me. I can still feel the emotion today when I think about it because it was like love.
mm,
It sounds so weird, but it was that ultimately when I ask those questions, who am I? Who do I want to be? What do they see in me that I don't see in me? Oh my, I am not conscious around who I am or who I want to be. And I need to have some respect for myself. And once I recognized that it was self-respect, that by the act of love turned into self-respect. And I have to say it's kind of your self-worth.
mhm.
It's kind of like your self-worth actually is directly tied to your net worth, believe it or not. And so if you understand that who you are and who you want to be, at that moment, I realized that crap happens in our lives all the time that we have no control over. But we do have control over the choices or our responses to those events that determines, of course, our outcomes.
Yeah.
And once I understood that from a really, like right then, it like just hit me, then it was like, I better be making some different choices here. And it was not only about money and this debt that this miraculous gift occurred, but I asked that question in every area of my life. And in your early 20s, you feel like you're in control of everything and you kind of master of the
You're really
universe.
not, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm curious because
Mhm,
you are clearly stating that this is more of a symptom of something that is you than just your being neglectful of paying on a debt. This is kind of
mhm.
a whole mindset that if money is the mirror of everything else that we how we engage with life, can I ask that personal question because we are on the question guy? How are you
Mhm.
dealing with all of your life at that time in your life?
Oh, at that time, I was my own shit show on every single level.
I
I
wasn't
mean,
expecting you to say that. Jeez.
I was I was in my early 20s. I was crazy. You're doing jobs that you don't like. You're
But you
just,
just got out of law school.
yeah, yeah,
No, that few and far between people go to law school, survive it, and then can say, well, I know you didn't say you're a lawyer, but still you went to law school.
yeah. I know, I know. It happens to the best of us. Um, yeah, and honestly, from that point forward, from that gift that reminded me of self love for me, um, that from that point forward, my life changed slowly. Every decision from that point forward had an intentional purpose.
And I use that word
And
a lot. Yeah, good.
yeah, and so, it was a 10-year journey to get out of that debt. But I did and was better off for it. I think everything in life is a journey and it happens to us for a reason, and what's the lesson from it? And if we don't understand that there's a lesson behind it, then we'll just keep circling around and making the same mistakes again, and thinking, woe is me. But for me, I understood, whoa, there's something here for me. And this is why of who I am today, because I understand that journey of money. I understand that I was there too.
Mhm.
Anyone could make a different decision, a different choice starting today, and start to be conscious about the choices that they make around money
So let's put this into a
or
different
love or
or
what
love.
health or whatever.
Well, let's put this into a different framework because I think it's that journey that you said you went on, that path that you had to follow, because now you are a fill in the blank. You are
Yeah.
a
CEO of a wealth management firm that manages over $200 million.
how did that happen?
I know. Intentional. Intentional. What I realized in my early 20s is that I wanted, that I did, that I knew who I was. Once that occurred, I knew who I wanted to be.
Okay.
And with that vision, I was able to make deliberate choices along the way that got me in that place. My area of expertise is negotiation, mediation, arbitration, which I already mentioned.
Mhm.
And I was with a national dispute resolution firm. And that firm sent me to Utah to open up a Salt Lake City office. And it was very entrepreneurial. I loved what I was doing. But what happened is I became a spokesperson on alternative dispute resolution, arbitration, and was no longer doing settlement conferences or mediations. And so at 30, I had someone in human resources that took me through a friend that took me through a battery of tests. And finance came up as something that I would do relatively well at, or financial planning, personal finance. Um, and I made that switch at 30
Okay.
into finance, financial planning, wealth management, and worked my way to a place where I needed to create my own firm because I felt like wealth management was not addressing the needs of the clients first.
So can we just tap into that a little bit? And then I've
Hmm.
got a few follow-up questions. Um,
Lead me.
what does it mean that it doesn't tap into the needs of the client? What are people missing?
Mm,
And on a broad, so look at 50,000 foot view down. What big strokes on the brush. What are
yeah.
people not thinking about?
Well, historically, the industry was created in sales. And so for an individual to access solutions around money, it was a sales environment
Okay.
versus a fiduciary environment where they have to put your interests first, like a CPA. And so I created a firm that was like a CPA firm that had to put your interests first, not last. So that's what's changed over the years in the financial services industry is you're seeing more and more firms that are fiduciaries that work on the same side of the table as you. And that's why my firm was so successful is because I understood that very early on and was able to make that change. And clients that ask for advice around their money expect to get a fiduciary response. And they didn't, it was very shielded or not understood that that really was not the case.
Mm,
It was kind of more of a buyer's beware.
mm.
Which is why people own a lot of annuities, which is why people own a lot of life insurance. It's all of those things historically, how the profession was set up, and it wasn't even a profession at the time. So I don't want to go. That's a long story, but that's how my firm was created. And so when you're in alignment with who you are and your values, life is a lot easier and it's more fun.
So the follow-up question goes back to your story. Did you ever find out? You said the donor, that
Mm.
$1,000 donation was from an anonymous person.
Yes,
What's
and Dr. Key, not many people ask me that question, and you're probably only the
well,
third person.
it's begging the question because
Oh,
no, all the audience wants to know, and so I'm
oh,
asking the audience's question for them.
I
Surely you
did.
found out. Okay.
Several months later, I found out. And it was a woman who actually went to the same church that I attended, and she had no money herself
Okay.
to be doing that. She had no money to be doing that. But I found her like 5 years later.
Oh,
Like
you
it
mean
like
after the
I was
fact?
Yeah.
Oh,
So I was actually it was more like 10 years later because I was in finance now. So it was about 10 years later. I was in finance. I was doing relatively well, and I tried to look her up and I found her. And when I found her, she that weekend was having a yard sale selling all of her possessions, and she was moving to Pennsylvania because she had some elder parents that she needed to take care of. And was selling her stuff so she had the money to do that. So her heart was very much a servant heart. Uh, and so I had an envelope in my pocket when I went to visit her, and there she is with her yard sale, and it had $5,000 in it. And I had no idea that she was moving. I had no idea what her situation was, but I felt like for the interest earned from that gift.
Do you know why the answer to that question is so important? Did you know why I had to ask the question?
Why?
Because when you said an anonymous person, you don't have to cry, it's okay. When you said an anonymous person did this for you, you questioned your own value. When you met the woman, were you able to talk about that?
Oh, I think as I get older, the significance of it becomes greater and more meaningful.
Okay,
At the time, I'm in my 30s, so I still think I'm conquering the world. Um, um, but yes, I had a conversation with her about it in terms of who I was and what I was doing. And and I think at the time I understood the change in my brain as it relates to consciousness, wealth consciousness. Um, and to articulate that to her, today would be a very different conversation than it
sure,
was when I was 30.
sure. With the time that we have remaining, let me ask you one more question, please.
Hmm.
For those who are watching, listening, and especially the women who are watching and listening who
Hmm.
may be finding themselves in a very similar situation, regardless of their age,
Yep.
just financially strapped or even in the fear of foreclosure or whatever that looks like. Um, and they don't foresee any guardian angel stepping in and helping them out.
Hmm.
Can you give them something today to kind of get them started?
Absolutely. And we kind of mentioned it a little bit in the storyline. Is unpack what your story is. What story are you telling yourself about money? First of all, did your parents talk about money? And then what story are you telling yourself? And is it your story or is it your parents' story and not yours? Um, and then be aware. Self awareness is so important. And I think that's really the story of what happened to me when it was like a snap. Success around money and love and relationships and health is really around self-respect of yourself, self-awareness, self-love. Because it's an inside job, unfortunately. It's not an outside job. So if you show self-love to yourself and compassion to yourself and are aware, then you'll understand that actually money is looking for you, not the other way around. Money's energy, it just flows. So when you understand that money is looking for you, what ideas do you have for it? What are you creating that money can find you? And I think that's really important because it disrupts our thinking around it.
I think that's perfect, and it's a great way to end this conversation. Kim, thank you so much for joining me in another edition of the Question Guy podcast. I would like to get you back on the Coach's Corner show because we can then talk about money and what to do with it. But until then, I want to thank everybody for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time. Take care.